I shouldn't remember the way she said it, but I do. The words stuck to the air, thick and heavy, like grease on the walls of the shop. This was a mistake. Her voice wasn't angry, just low, almost careful, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I was still holding the wrench, my hands blackened with oil, but suddenly I felt like the one who'd done something wrong. Not because I had, but because she made me feel it. She stood by the counter, arms folded across her chest, jacket hanging loose around her shoulders. Mid-40s, sharp lines on her face softened only when she blinked too slowly, as if tired of holding herself together. I'd only seen her come in a couple of times before, asking about her car, waiting longer than necessary, saying she didn't mind. But that day she lingered differently. That day, she looked at me like I was too close to something she'd buried. I don't know why I answered her the way I did. Maybe because the silence after her words felt unbearable. Then why are you still here? I meant it as a joke, like a way out, but it landed heavier. She glanced at the door, then at me and didn't move. The hum of the fluorescent light above us made the silence sharper. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying to look busy, but I couldn't stop catching her reflection in the window. She wasn't leaving, and I wasn't telling her to. I should have said something ordinary, asked if she needed coffee or if she wanted me to call her a cab. But instead, I tightened my grip on the rag until the fabric twisted hard in my hand. I felt stupidly young, small even, and yet, she still hadn't walked away. Finally, she let out this short laugh, dry, humorless. You're too young to understand. I don't know what she thought I wouldn't understand. Regret? Loneliness? The way people sometimes come back to places they shouldn't? Her tone was sharper than her words, but I caught the crack inside them. I leaned against the counter, pretending to look through some papers, but really I was trying not to stare at her mouth as she spoke. Her eyes swept the shop, never settling too long. You don't even know what mistake means yet. The thing is, she wasn't wrong. But there was something in the way she said it, like she wanted me to argue. I didn't. I just let the space stretch between us, the ticking clock and the faint smell of gasoline filling the gap. At one point, she brushed her fingers against the edge of the counter, almost absent-minded, tracing circles in the dust. I found myself staring at that more than her face. The smallest gesture, but it felt personal, like a thought she didn't mean to share. We stayed like that longer than we should have. No car keys in her hand. No real reason for her to be standing there. And me trying not to admit I didn't want her to leave. When she finally did, it was with the faintest tilt of her head, a look that wasn't quite goodbye. She walked out into the street like she'd forgotten something but refused to turn back. I stood there for a while, rag still twisted in my hands, heart beating louder than the clock above the door. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. I told myself I was overthinking it. People come and go from the shop all the time. But the next morning, when I saw her car still parked down the block, my stomach did that strange twist again. She came back inside like she hadn't walked out on me the night before. No apology, no explanation, just a quiet presence that made the room feel smaller. Still not fixed? She asked, her voice level but thinner today. I shrugged, avoiding her eyes, waiting on a part. It was true but not the whole truth. The part was already in. I just hadn't touched her car since she left. Something about it made me stall, like fixing it too quickly might erase the reason she kept coming back. She leaned against the doorway, arms folded, a little more tired looking than yesterday. Up close, I noticed faint smudges under her eyes. Makeup she hadn't bothered to clean off, or maybe none at all. It struck me that she didn't care if I saw her like that. And that felt dangerous. Because the woman who carried herself like she was always in control, who could silence me with just a few words, was suddenly letting the cracks show. You shouldn't wait around here, I said. My voice came out more defensive than I meant. It's not comfortable. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You think I'm here because of the car? The way she said it, low with a rough edge, made my chest tighten. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, I pretended to sort through the mess of tools on the bench. But my mind kept circling back to what she just admitted without really admitting. That maybe her being here had less to do with bolts and engines, and more to do with something she couldn't put into words. And then, out of nowhere, she said, I left him last week. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering onto the floor. I didn't ask who him was. I didn't need to. The way her eyes flicked down and then away told me enough. She exhaled slowly, brushing her hair back, the kind of gesture that looked casual until you noticed how her fingers trembled. It feels stupid standing here. I know you're probably thinking I should go. I wasn't. That was the problem. Instead, I caught myself noticing how her jacket hung loosely on her shoulders, like she hadn't bothered to put it on right. How her voice caught halfway through a sentence before she steadied it. How her presence filled the room in a way that left no space for anyone else. I wanted to say something, anything that might break the tension, but the words jammed in my throat. She moved closer, her steps unhurried, deliberate. For a second, I thought she might just pass by. But when she reached me, she let her hand rest lightly on my arm. Not a grab, not even a full touch, just her fingers brushing fabric, testing something. Stay, she said softly. The word echoed louder than the drop of the wrench. And I nearly said what I shouldn't, that I wanted to, that I already was. Her hand lingered longer than it should have. Just the faint brush of her fingers against my arm. But it burned through the sleeve of my shirt like heat left behind from a flame. I swallowed hard, trying to mask it, but she must have felt my muscles stiffen. For a moment, neither of us moved. The hum of the light above and the faint ticking of the clock pressed against the silence. I shouldn't have asked that, she said finally, her hand slipping back. Her tone was steady, but her eyes gave her away. There was something raw there, something stripped down. I wanted to say she was wrong, that she wasn't asking anything I didn't already want. But I forced myself to step back, to put a thin strip of distance between us. It's fine, I muttered, grabbing a rag I didn't need and pretending to clean the workbench. It wasn't fine. My chest was tight, every nerve wired. You're quiet, she said, tilting her head, studying me like I was the one unraveling. Before I could answer, the sharp buzz of a phone cut through the air. Her bag was slumped on the chair nearby, screen lighting up with a name I didn't recognize. She glanced at it, jaw tightening. She didn't pick up. The phone stopped ringing, but the silence it left was worse. I turned back to her, but she was already watching me, arms crossed again. Not the casual kind, the protective kind. See, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Mistakes call back. I didn't know what to do with that. My throat felt dry. You don't have to answer. She gave a bitter laugh. Don't I? The way she looked at me then, half daring me, half pleading, pulled something reckless out of me. I wanted to tell her she didn't need anyone else in this room, that I would stay as long as she wanted, that I couldn't stop thinking about her since the moment she walked in yesterday. But I didn't. Instead, I let the words die on my tongue. She stepped closer again, not touching this time, but close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume mixed with cigarette smoke. My hands twitched at my sides, fighting the urge to close the gap. You're not saying what's on your mind, she murmured, searching my face. I shook my head. Neither are you. Her lips parted like she was about to argue, but then she stopped. She just stopped, letting the weight of unspoken things hang heavy between us. And then 3 sharp knocks at the shop door. We both froze. Through the glass, a shadow moved past, then paused. A man's voice called out, muffled but firm. You in there? Her whole body tensed. She didn't move toward the door, didn't answer, just looked at me with something close to panic flickering beneath her composure. I should have stepped away, should have broken whatever spell had been weaving itself between us. But I didn't. I stayed close, too close. Her whisper reached me, low and urgent. "Don't say anything." And for the first time I wondered not if we could cross the line, but if we already had. The knock at the door eventually faded, footsteps retreating down the street. But the silence left behind was louder than any noise. She hadn't moved, her back pressed against the counter, hands clenched just enough that her knuckles whitened. I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for her to speak. When she finally did, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You shouldn't have seen me like this." It was the kind of line people throw out when they're trying to pull away. But her eyes told a different story. They weren't pushing me back. They were pulling me in. "I don't—" I stopped, the words breaking in my throat. I tried again, quieter. "I don't care how I see you." Her gaze flickered at that, sharp and searching, like she was testing the weight of what I said. Then she let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but it caught halfway. "You make it sound simple," she said. "Maybe it is." The words left me before I could stop them. Her lips parted slightly, and for a second I thought she might actually smile. But instead, she leaned in closer. Not touching, but close enough that I felt her presence like a current pulling me forward. "Do you know what you're doing?" she asked, almost a whisper. "No," I admitted. "Do you?" That cracked something open. Her hand came up, almost touching my face, then falling back before it reached me. She pressed her palm flat against the counter instead, grounding herself. "I left a man I thought I'd spend my life with," she said, voice trembling now. "And here I am, standing in a shop with someone who should mean nothing, and somehow means too much already." The honesty in her tone nearly knocked me back. I wanted to answer with the same weight, to say what had been gnawing at me since she first lingered by the counter. Instead, I blurted the truth too raw, too fast. "I think about you." Her eyes widened just enough to tell me she hadn't expected it. Not like that. Not from me. The room seemed to shrink. The fluorescent hum dimmed in my ears, replaced by the pounding of my own pulse. She didn't move. Neither did I. "Say that again," she whispered. My throat tightened. My mouth opened, but nothing came. The words stuck, thick with fear and want. The clock ticked once, twice. She stepped even closer, so close I could see the fine lines at the corner of her eyes, the way her breath trembled just a little as it left her. We stared at each other, suspended in something that felt too fragile to name, too dangerous to break. And then she asked the question that split the air open. "What happens if we don't stop?" Her question still hung between us like smoke. What happens if we don't stop? I didn't have an answer, not one I could trust myself to say out loud. But before either of us could move, the sound of her phone buzzing again cut through the air. She froze, glanced at the bag, then at me. This time she reached for it. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the screen toward herself. I caught it before she tilted it away, my boss's name flashing across the screen. The air left my chest. I know," she cut in sharply, shoving the phone face down on the counter. It hit me like a jolt of electricity, numbing and burning at once. My boss. The man who'd given me a shot when no one else would. The man who trusted me with the keys to this place. "You didn't tell me?" I said, my voice cracking more than I wanted it to. Her chin lifted, defensive, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of guilt. "Would you have listened to me if I had?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was I didn't know. She stepped closer, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "It's over between us. I left him because I couldn't breathe anymore. Because he didn't see me. Not the way." She stopped, biting the inside of her cheek. "Not the way what?" I pressed, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. Her silence was its own kind of confession. I turned away, running a hand through my hair, pacing the length of the shop. The walls felt too close, the floor uneven beneath my feet. My head was buzzing with the image of my boss's face, of what he would say if he ever found out. "You could have told me," I muttered, hating the way my voice shook, "from the start, and risked you shutting the door on me before I could even—" She stopped herself, swallowed hard, then said it anyway. "Before I could even feel what this feels like?" The words slammed into me, raw and unguarded. I turned back, and there she was, jacket slipping off one shoulder, eyes shining with something close to desperation. "I'm not asking you to understand," she whispered. "I'm asking you not to walk away." Every part of me wanted to run, out the door, into the street, anywhere but here. But my feet wouldn't move. My chest hurt with the weight of it all. The betrayal that wasn't mine, the choice that wasn't mine, the need that definitely was. I should have told her no. I should have ended it right there. Instead, the words that came out were quiet. Too quiet. "Then tell me why me?" Her eyes softened, lips parting like she'd been waiting for me to ask all along. And when she answered, it wasn't the words that broke me. It was the way she said them. "Because you see me." Her words clung to me. "Because you see me." I couldn't look away from her. Not when she said it like that, like she'd been waiting years for someone to notice. And not when every part of me wanted to answer with something I couldn't take back. "You don't know what that does to me," I said quietly. Her brow furrowed. "What does it do?" I let out a shaky breath, my voice low, raw. "It makes me want you to stay." The confession hit the air, unpolished, reckless. I felt exposed the second it left me. But she didn't flinch. She didn't laugh or pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, closing the small space between us until I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin. "You think I don't want that too?" she whispered. I searched her face for hesitation, for any sign this was just loneliness talking. But all I saw was truth. Messy, dangerous, undeniable truth. The silence stretched, heavy, trembling on the edge of something we both knew we shouldn't touch. My pulse roared in my ears. If I reached out, if I said one more word, there would be no turning back. And then she did what I couldn't. She pressed her forehead lightly against mine. Not a kiss. Not quite. Just the barest point of contact, enough to undo me completely. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Scared of what this means. Scared of who we'll hurt." I closed my eyes, feeling her breath mingle with mine. "Me too." We stayed like that, caught in a fragile balance, both of us waiting for the other to pull away or push forward. Neither of us moved. Finally, she pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. "If we do this, there's no hiding. No pretending it didn't happen." I swallowed hard. "And if we don't?" Her gaze dropped, lingering on my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Then we go back to strangers who almost said too much." The choice sat heavy between us. I felt the weight of every unspoken word, every glance we'd stolen since that first night. Walking away would be safer, cleaner. But the thought of her leaving, of never hearing her voice say my name the way it did in my head, felt unbearable. So I gave her the only thing I could, the truth. "I don't want to go back." Her lips parted, her breath catching just slightly. For a second, I thought she might lean in, close the distance. But instead, she reached for my hand. Just my hand. Her fingers slid into mine, hesitant, trembling. But there. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't the breaking point I imagined. But it was real. It was hers. It was mine. And in that quiet, electric moment, I knew we'd already crossed the line. Her hand stayed in mine longer than it should have. Not a casual brush, not an accident, an intention. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was steady, real. I remember staring at the way her fingers laced with mine, uneven, trembling just slightly. My hand, rough with grease and calluses, didn't belong against hers, but somehow, it fit. She looked at me then, really looked. Not like a customer. Not like a mistake she kept walking into, but like someone who saw me in return. I don't know what happens now, she admitted, her voice stripped of all the sharp edges she used to keep herself guarded. I squeezed her hand, unsure if it was reassurance or selfishness. Neither do I. We stood in the middle of that shop, surrounded by oil stains, buzzing lights, and unfinished work. Yet it felt like the only place in the world where we could say what we couldn't say anywhere else. The phone didn't ring again. The knocks didn't return. The world outside kept moving, but in that suspended silence, I realized how much had shifted. She wasn't just the woman who lingered by the counter anymore. She wasn't just the one who whispered, "This was a mistake," and still stayed. She had become the person who made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. What I wanted, what I could risk, what I could lose. And me? I wasn't just the kid fixing cars in the back of the shop. Not to her. To her, I was something else. Something she hadn't let herself reach for in years. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. We didn't promise forever. Didn't swear we'd never hurt each other. Didn't even kiss that night. But the truth we'd shared was enough to break something open in both of us. I walked her to the door when the sun was already low, painting the glass in a dull amber light. She paused, her hand still brushing against mine. "Do you regret it?" I asked before I could stop myself. She turned, eyes softer now, voice steady. "Not if you don't." I shook my head. "I don't." For a moment, she just stood there, as if weighing the words. Then she gave me the faintest smile, the kind you give when you're still scared, but you're not walking away. And that was enough. When the door closed behind her, I knew nothing about tomorrow. I didn't know what my boss would say, or how the world would bend around us. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I couldn't pretend anymore, because once someone truly sees you, there's no going back.